while I'm waiting for it to work. And then we see that we are live once we have the 0:01, which we're now at 7. So
Nice.
just to keep everybody updated on our time. Hey, everybody. Welcome to Let's Chat Live, where we can let's chat live it up. That's the catchphrase that I get to use whenever Chris asks me to host. Love to be here. Love to be back. And I think I'm especially going to love being here with you, Colleen. This is Dwight, or you can call me D if you prefer, or whatever, call me anything but late to the podcast broadcast, I guess. So Colleen, welcome to the show.
Thank you, Dwight. It's really fun to be here.
It's fun to see, you have a great logo for your podcast, by the way. I can see it over your shoulder. It's a cat with pizza. No, that's the other thing over your shoulder, which is also cool. But yeah, I really love that. I saw it earlier when Chris sent it to me, and it is super, super dope.
Thanks.
And let's start out with that. Tell everybody a little bit about you and your podcast and everything you've ever done.
Okay. Wow. All right. Goodness. Well, we'll start with the podcast. So the podcast is called Shame Piñata. There's a little piñata behind me, and keep not knowing which way to move. And
it's hard, right? It's opposite.
It's like backwards. Yeah. It's very, very difficult. So Shame Piñata is a show about creating rites of passage for real life transitions. And that's the way that I say it. What it means is sort of twofold. The mission is kind of twofold. So if there's something coming up in your life that's a traditional kind of ceremony, like a wedding or a birthday or a graduation, and you talk to me about it, I would suggest that you make it super personalized. You really use that time for you, and you go outside the box and you do it your way so that it's super fulfilling for you, right? That's the first branch. The second branch is that there's things that happen in our lives that that we might not think ceremony would work for, really personal moments, like outliving a parent, or the last child leaving the house, or leaving a job that we really didn't want to leave, but we decided we needed to, really significant things that happen with us. And being mindful and thoughtful about those, and using ritual or ceremony, small or large, can be very fulfilling in those moments.
That's interesting when you mentioned that. So there's kind of official things, like official would be what, like a graduation or something, or a religious rite of passage or something. And then there's the unofficial that oftentimes are, you're right. If a parent dies, it's like we all, well, I don't know if we think about it a lot, or we, sometimes we do, sometimes we don't, but that is something that happens to the majority of people. In fact, if things go well, my children will get to see me die. Maybe not see me up close and personal. I don't mean that, although maybe, depending on the circumstances. But that is a rite of passage of kind of the way that life works. Huh.
Well, and not only losing your parent, but if they died at 50, say we're 20 and they were 50 and they passed away, when you turn 50, that's probably a moment for you, because that's when they pass, So, but that's something like nobody would really acknowledge or think about. But yeah, it could be very significant and worth taking some time with. And maybe if it's a big feeling, get some friends together and talk about it, or, that kind of thing.
That's interesting, because you also see, and I wonder about how this interacts with rites of passage, but you see community spring up around these things. Like if I lost my parent when I was young, then there's probably a community out there. There are friends, or, and of course, in modern times, there's online makes a community out of anything, like cat pizza enthusiasts, for example, or whatever, that I could probably find them, right now. We got a question from one of them. No, I'm just kidding. But right. But you can find like other people who lost a parent at a young age, or other people who, went through a major change in their life, or were laid off, or I had someone talking just the other day about going through a surgery, and how they've identified with other people through Facebook groups or grief groups for people who've lost someone. Anyway. Yeah. Does community play a role for rites of passage usually, do you think? Or
well, I think there's something really, a ceremony can be done solo, obviously, always. but it feels like kinda like we wouldn't get married. Well, I suppose you might elope, but generally having the community there is, like, an important part. The witnessing is very important, like, I'm changing my in the case of, graduating, I'm becoming I have this degree now, and it's nice if people see that and acknowledge it and remember it, especially if it's a very, emotional day or a very like a lot of people go through their wedding and they don't even the next day they're like, "Oh, it happened, but I wasn't present," because the emotions were so high. And to have people around who were like, "Yep, you got married. I was there. I held your hand," like who can sort of back them up on that. It's powerful. But what you
Yeah.
said was also reminding me that as far as like uh, affiliation groups, groups of people who've been through the thing that we a unique thing. It can be very healing to have people who get it, right?
Mhm.
Because a lot of people will be like, "Oh, that sounds really hard," but you get in a room with people who've been there, whatever that crazy
Yeah.
hard thing was, and it's like it can be really transformative.
I had read something a while back about how group therapy got started and
Mm.
or really took off. I guess I don't know if it was the first time, but it's a cool story, whether it's true or not. No, but apparently there were veterans or what they at the time called shell shocked, and now we call it PTSD, people who were home from the war or following the war, having a very hard time, and they'd be waiting for psychiatrists or psychologists to meet with them, and the waiting room would be full of people. And they found that people who were waiting longer were doing better.
Hmm.
And to looking into that, they find that they're talking to each other, right?
Mhm.
And of
Mhm.
course, it was a hospital, so they had to find a way to capture billing for that service. So that's where group therapy came from. But it's really powerful. Then, so do you feel like there's a unifying feature to ritual
Yeah, I mean,
potentially?
yeah, potentially. Now I don't know that a ritual would necessarily happen where you get to have everybody who was in attendance be, a survivor of the whatever with you, unless you did it
Yeah.
in a group that was about that.
Right, on purpose, like an AA group or a group therapy, right? Yeah.
Right, right. I was in a homicide survivors group a long time ago, a couple of years
Mm,
ago now, because I lost a friend when I was in college who was killed, and it took me 20 years to get myself in a room with other homicide survivors, and that was where I was really wanting to be that whole time, and it
yeah.
was really powerful. And we did sort of a simple ceremony. We didn't get to. It wasn't anything fancy, but we each got a time to share about our loved one however
Mhm.
we wanted. Like that night was our night, and we got 15, 20, 30 minutes to dominate and talk about our
Mm.
person. And everybody who did that, it was kind of like a mini ceremony. They really got
Wow.
to share about their person with this group of people who really got it from their
Yeah.
own experience. So that was very
You know
powerful.
that they're going to understand you. Yeah. That
Yeah,
must have been that must have been super powerful. Did
it
you
was.
said it took a long time. Did it just take a long time to were you aware of that need or looking for it, or was it just 20 years before you even thought, "Oh, that's a thing?"
No, I wanted it pretty much right away. I just didn't know how to get it, and I was trying over the years. I kept finding myself in groups that weren't quite right, like parents of
Mm,
murdered children, and it wasn't a child for me, so that wasn't people were very nice, but it wasn't really the right thing for me. Um, and it just took a while. I honestly, something kind of I'd get like a bee in my bonnet about it every 5 years or something, and I'd go looking and I didn't, ever find anything, but then at the end, I
mm,
was like, somebody suggested or I don't know, I think somebody must have suggested that I call the police, and I said, "Hey, what victim resources do you have?" Because I was, like, trying online and nothing was coming. Because there's a lot of groups that, like, used to function or that kind of half function, or
mm.
I went to one meeting once with a group where it was kind of ended up being like a fundraising meeting, and I was like, "This is not why I'm here." I was like, "This is really bad." So, but then I found one in the East Bay where I live, and it was great. It was these 2, they were sort of on the intern side of being therapists, but they were completely competent, and they held a really safe space, and they followed lots of crazy protocols, and they were great. And I'll never see them again because, I could never acknowledge them on off the camp premises, like, "Take 2 steps, and I can't acknowledge you." Okay, they were very strict because they were in training, I think, but
Oh, okay. They're like, "Don't look at me.
yeah,
You see me in
exactly.
the community. Run away." No.
Exactly.
But Wow, and that's amazing. So in a way, it almost becomes like ritualistic to find the right place. In that case, at least it sounds like you went
Yeah.
through a real specific process to find. Yes, that's a pretty niche or niche, either one, thing to find, and that's
Yeah.
pretty cool. Was it
Yeah.
those? Did that contribute to your interest in starting this podcast, or were there other things that uh, directed you to put your passion and your interest into this topic?
No, it really wasn't that at all. Well, I guess it kind of was death in a different way,
Mhm.
tangentially. My father passed away 10 years ago. And right after my father passed, my mother started developing a heart problem, which I think is pretty common. And so I went to stay with her in Susan, Ohio. And I just felt like I needed to. I live in the San Francisco Bay Area, and I had been with my mom at the funeral and flew back here. And I was leaving the airport. I was driving away from the airport in San Francisco, and I saw the word "wrong" like superimposed, like in red lettering across what I was seeing on the highway. And I was like, "Oh, I'm not supposed to be here. I'm supposed to be there." It was just like really hit me.
Wow.
And I went back. I rearranged my life. My mom said, "You can come stay," and my husband said, "You can go stay," and my job said, "You can go stay," and everybody was super, super
Kind of
supportive.
lined up. Yeah.
It did, and, I spent 9 months with my mom, and living with her was a little bit challenging because
Mm.
just like we're 2 very strong-minded people, and it was really hard to remember how to live together, but,
Yeah.
um, anyway, sorry, long story. After about
No, that's why we're here. Go as long as you need.
Okay. Have some water then. After about, gosh, 4 or 5 months of staring at her to make sure she wasn't gonna pass away, because I was mostly worried about that, um, I decided to do something else, and there's a college in my hometown, Worcester, Ohio, called the College of Worcester. Yeah, and I decided to audit a class so that I wasn't just sitting around staring at my mom. And,
Mhm.
I took a radio class, and they had a radio station then, it was called WU 91 or WCWS,
Okay.
Worcester. They gave up the license, so it's just an online radio station. They don't have the broadcast
Oh, okay.
anymore, which was sad, but when I was there, they
Yeah.
did, and I always wondered, so I took this class called Radio Workshop, I think it was called Radio Workshop, and, I was auditing and I was a townie, so I thought, "Well, they're not gonna let me have a show, but I wanna, do this anyway," and we read all about the
Mhm.
history of radio, and we had to do news readings on we had to sign up for once a week news readings where
Mhm.
we found our own stories and we just read them, and I always wondered when I was growing
That's
up
cool.
why the college kids reading the news sounded like they had a gun to their head. And it was
Oh.
because they were in this radio
Oh.
workshop and they had to do it. And it was terrifying. It was so terrifying. But eventually, I got used to this weekly thing. And then they told me I could have a show and
Mm.
then I had another show and it was and I just fell in love with it. So I came back to the Bay Area eventually and wanted to get into radio and was like, "This is, like, a little bit harder here," it's, like, kind of yeah, totally night and day. So, I thought about it for a long time and finally decided I would just do a podcast, because that way I could get some experience and, have some fun. And,
Mhm.
I actually was able to get my first piece on Bay Area radio, like, 2 weeks ago. Um,
Oh,
KPFA, which is a station in Berkeley, it's a very hip, crunchy granola, wonderful
that's cool.
it was, like, the first public radio station in the country, apparently.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
That's a gotta be a really cool experience.
It's 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 really
I
cool.
tell you, it is a bug that you get, isn't it, to put
Yeah.
things out there and, to be able to share, and there's a whole different kind of connection. One of the things that I've really liked about podcasting is there's a connection with listeners, but there's also really cool people that you get to meet. Like the fact that we're here having this conversation so many miles away from each other. I actually don't know where you are. Where are you? In the Bay Area?
Yeah, San Francisco Bay Area.
Oh,
Yeah.
okay, okay.
Yeah.
I mean, for all I knew, you could have been 3 blocks away, and, that would have been awkward, but, because 'cause it'd be like, "Why didn't we just," whatever.
Right.
But, getting to meet people that we would never know otherwise, right?
Right.
Yeah.
Right, absolutely. I've been dabbling, and there's the audio recording community, like the Audio Engineering Society, there's those folks, and then there's the
Mhm.
PBS, PRX radio folks, and then there's the podcast folks. There's these three really different groups, and they're really different kinds of people who are in them, and they interact with each other in really different ways.
Huh. That's really interesting. What do you find are there any differences that stand out, or is it just a feel?
Well, the audio engineers always talk about gear. It's like the main thing they want to talk
Uh,
about. And podcast people want to chat a lot, you know, and like
what?
talk about their lives. And it's very like life imitating art. It's just like life, like just life being art, right? And then the radio people are very formatted and structured and fact checking, and like
Yeah.
it's a
Yeah,
different thing.
that's a difference right there. The fact checking is fact. People steer away from that sometimes in their podcast. Yours, though, I imagine your show is probably well, and I guess this depends on the format. I was going to say it's probably a little research intensive at times, but do you report on ritual and things, or do you mostly have guests talking about their experiences, or how do you usually do it?
I started out with just guests and wanted it to be only guests, because I didn't think I had much to say. I thought, "Well, I can think of something to say to start and ask questions and then finish, and that'll be enough. That's enough from me." But then when COVID happened, my friend contacted me and she said, "So you're always talking about we should create rituals when we're going through tough situations." And I was
Mhm.
like, "Yeah." And she said, "Well, COVID is a tough situation. So what rituals should we be doing?" And and it was like, so I was like, "Okay,
Good
well,"
idea.
that's how I put
Yeah.
together like a really simple ritual about like dealing with crazy fear and dealing with overwhelm and just very simple concepts. And I started doing the rituals with her because like she asked for them, so we were doing them together. And then I was like, well, I could talk about this on a podcast. So I've developed a pattern now with the show of every other episode is an interview, and then the other one is just me. It's been talking about things to keep us sane during COVID, like what do I need right now with COVID, and then I kind of weave that into an episode.
Wow, that's really fascinating because that embraces the different definitions you brought up earlier, right? Is there's the more official, and you're really talking then about creating your own and owning the process of ritualization, if
Hmm.
you will.
Yeah,
Yeah, that's
exactly.
really powerful. I like that a lot. Um, I find that every time I've done Let's Chat Live, I end up subscribing to a new podcast, which I'm not going to claim it doesn't take a lot for me to subscribe to the podcast, I guess, but it does have to be interesting. And it's fascinating. Yours is one I would already have been listening to. I hadn't heard about it until the interview was lined up. And so I am excited to go and check it out. That sounds like the ritual you were developing with your friend was designed for comfort or at
Yeah,
least for safety. I'm not sure. What would you
yeah.
say? What was the goal of it?
That the first one was about, releasing fear and centering in our strength, something just really basic. It was sort of a two-parter. It was like, we're gonna identify the fear and da, 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 and let it go, and then we're gonna clean it out. Okay, now we're gonna bring something in. What are we gonna bring in? Strength, focusing on strength.
What did you
Um,
do for it? Like,
uh,
is there, the ritual behavior?
yeah. Well, basically, let's see, I'm trying to remember that very first one,
You got
what we did.
a dove and a knife. No, that's kidding.
No, no, no. It wasn't like that. It wasn't like the Hollywood kind of ritual. Gosh, I
That's
kind
next
of
week.
forget what we did that very first one. A subsequent one was about releasing overwhelm, and I did that one a lot more. I started doing that one
Okay.
every week. I was like trying, everybody was offering stuff when COVID started, like, I'll do meditation and I'll do, yoga
Right.
online. And, everybody was trying to do something. And so I was offering this weekly releasing overwhelm ceremony, which I was thinking to do one recently that was called like continuing to release overwhelm. And then I realized I think we're moving on. I think we don't need to keep, I mean, maybe, there's still stuff going on, but
Well,
I
we
was like,
still have it. I mean, it's had a real effect on everybody,
it exactly.
Yeah. It's
Yeah.
interesting to have a situation in the world, and I think for our generation, it's maybe even a little different to have something that affects, I would say, literally everybody. And
Yeah.
maybe there's a few people out there somewhere who don't feel affected but I would say everybody, practically speaking, we could
Yeah.
round it up to everybody having some real impact. So that's very cool. You're doing it's more than just interesting. Then you're actually making this impact in people's lives that they can opt in to.
Yeah, and so there's sort of 2 layers of it, like well, maybe more, that you could just listen to the show and just, whatever. You could listen to the solo shows, I guess they're called, when it's just me talking, and at the end of them, I've been offering that one thing I call a ritual sketch, which is not it's like a walking you through it's like the first part's like, "Oh, re overwhelm is a thing, and we might wanna release it,
Mhm.
and, da, 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 da," and the second part, the ritual sketch is like, here's what we might do. If you and I sat down to have a ritual, we might do this. We might, light a candle and then we might take a couple breaths and then I maybe breathe for a sec. And then like, okay, then we might uh think about a good memory and then we might do some journaling and I walk through it pretty quickly. It's just meant to be a sketch. So I'm not giving you a chance to do it with me,
Hmm.
but I'm giving you like a here's my idea. Take it if you want. Um, and and then another layer is that I've been offering monthly. It was weekly, now it's monthly circles. So if you wanted to come and like do one of those with me, you could.
So what does that entail,
Yeah.
doing a circle?
It's pretty much just a Zoom. It's just on Zoom.
Mhm.
Everything in my life is still on Zoom. And
Yeah.
you would
Yeah.
just sign up. I'm asking for a donation to Black Lives Matter, whatever you could donate,
Mm.
and then just come and show up. And then it would just be going through. It was like I think I blocked out 2 hours, but probably less. Just going through the steps of that, and it's kind of like a circle meditation, journaling, maybe some movement. I have one that's called Deep Rest, which I had submitted to, I forget the name of it. It was a festival to deal with death. They didn't want it because it was basically taking a nap together. But I
Oh.
did get to do it with my friends. I think the people at the festival thought, "Oh, people shouldn't pay for that." And I'm like, "Okay, whatever." But I did have a
I'd pay
circle.
to take a nap sometimes. Yeah.
But it was no, it was actually really fun because we got together, we talked about, like, what is rest about, because I wasn't sleeping with COVID, I was, like, all anxious all the time, and I other people were probably having that,
Yeah.
so
Well,
and we
sleep is a huge thing for people's emotional and mental well-being, and if you're doing it, uh, with a group like that, I can see that really having a sense once again of community or, "Hey, we all got each other's back here, and it's a safe
yeah,
place." That's pretty interesting, actually. Yeah.
exactly, the idea was, like, practice resting in intentional space where you're we've done some journaling or some kind of body release to release the stresses that's the targeted stresses and things that keep us
Mm.
up at night, right? Getting as many of them out as possible, and then setting them aside, setting them in a safe place, and then taking 20, 30 minutes, lowering the lights, and we all voted on what kind of music we wanted, and, then then we just, like, lay down. It ended up being very intimate. It was kind of like a slumber party.
Yeah.
We were all kind of like, then we chatted and, like the way you do it. It was very magical.
Wow. Screamo, heavy metal, I assume,
Right.
most of the music choices. No, but no, that's really cool, and, you do see some of these shared space things. It's a philosopher who I don't remember the name of, so here's a good example of a difference. You can tell I'm not the PRX, you know, not fact checked, except I have the book somewhere floating around here. He talked about what he called TAZ, or temporary autonomous zones.
Mhm.
And that's kind of what you're talking about, is like, here's a space. It's temporary. It's going to go away. We're not going to stay here, obviously, forever, but it's not a permanent fixture, but we're going to do our own thing. We're going to make the rules and follow it. And so there's a lot
Mm.
of real vibrant creativity involved with the ritual, it sounds like,
Mhm.
that you employ, you know.
Yeah, yeah, and the things that I'm offering that I talk about in um, my solo shows and then that I offer they're sort of canned, if you will. They're like just, generic. They're like,
Mhm.
"Oh, overwhelm," or, "Oh, strength," or, just basic
Sure.
concepts, but what really excites me about ritual is, like, if there's something going on in my life actually, I'm gonna release an episode on the 16th of April it's the first one in this tiny little series called Do You Need a Ceremony? And
Mm.
it's focused on, ceremonies for personal moments, right? And I started season 1. I'm in season 2 now. I started season 1 with weddings because I thought, "Oh, everybody's gonna know what that is," right? And now I'm starting to kinda weave into where I wanna go, which is, like, if I use myself as an example. I, just passed the 10-year mark on my dad passing away, and that was a significant moment for me because of lots of things, and I was like, "Wow, I think it's time to face some stuff that I haven't faced about him and me, and it's still here, even though it's been 10 years. And so I gathered like I thought about it a lot. I brainstormed with a friend. I gathered my friends on Zoom, and it was very complicated ritual that was targeted to work into two different areas where I had a lot of like old stuff that I wanted to like liberate myself from a little more. And I wanted my friends involved for support. And I gave them each like jobs. Like I wanted everybody in when I do rituals, I always want everybody involved. So like if I invite you, I'm gonna ask you, could you read this, or could you bring a reading that resonates for you about this topic? Or could you lead a dance, or could you say a blessing, or could you, give me this, whatever it is, kind of like weave everybody in. And then it was incredibly complicated to build up to, because I did like all this stuff for it. Like I had songs I wanted to play that were very meaningful, and at the last minute I was like, I'm gonna make videos out of them. So then I was like making videos, and then I wanted them all to watch me walk a labyrinth, but we were gonna be on Zoom. So I built a labyrinth, well, with chalk in the backyard, and walked it and filmed it. And, I was like meditating and filming at the same time, which is a little bit strange, but kind of worked. And then like I showed that video within this ceremony as like a part of it. I don't know
There's
if I'm explaining this very well, but
Oh, no, totally. And when you talk about it being meditative, I think people have a very restrictive view of what meditation is. Sometimes meditation is actually doing a thing that basically just takes enough of your brain's attention that you're not thinking about anything else, but yet isn't so deep that you're having to focus on it. And it's interesting. So in a way, and I get this, in a way, broadcasting, videoing, audioing, could put ing on audio, but I just did. So I'm going to TM that right now.
there you go.
But when you're in the zone, you're kind of in a flow state. It also shows
Yeah.
that your comfort level with it, that you, and this comes across in good podcasting, and I can see that you have this easy going, because you're very easy to talk to. And so I'm sure that carries over to where that could be now. And labyrinth walking is different than maze walking. I learned this just recently,
Mm.
to where, isn't it? It's designed to go circular towards the center and then back, or something like that. It's not meant to be hard to find,
Right,
like a
exactly.
maze.
It's meant to be super simple, and I'm not a labyrinth expert. I have friends who kind of are, but
Yeah,
it's although I know how to draw one now.
yeah,
um,
that's cool.
and redraw it after the rain takes it away. But yeah, they're meant to be. There's different ones, but they're meant to be pretty simple, and you're not supposed to get lost in them.
Right. Unless David Bowie's involved, but that's a whole
Right?
different.
I suppose you could.
Sorry. As a podcaster, I'm legally obligated to make any kind of pop culture reference that I can jam into a story, no matter how tired or how everyone's like, I hope he doesn't do that. But you must hear tons and tons of stories, and I wanted to ask if you had any favorites, either moving or funny, or things that have come across in the podcast as you've interviewed people, or experiences that they've shared.
Um, yeah, the one that jumps out to me the most is Tristy Taylor, who's an interfaith minister that I interviewed pretty recently. She had a really powerful story, and I was so happy that that's the one that got on KPFA. So it got a much wider audience than my show has, because it's such an important story she had. She and her husband couldn't conceive, and they went through fertility treatment, and it was hard. It was really hard on her body and on them, and at some point they decided that they were going to stop trying, and that was a real grief for her, a real loss. And oh, and she also had an ectopic pregnancy in
Mm,
there that she lost. So she lost a
yeah.
pregnancy, and she gave up this dream of being a mother all at once, pretty much.
Wow.
And she's a ritualist, and she did a beautiful three-part ritual for it, which involved, grieving with some people. They had a grief ceremony with her and some friends, and then, there was a sitting Shiva, which she's not Jewish herself, but she knows about, world religions, and
Mhm.
felt that the sitting Shiva for 7 days felt like a really important thing for her with that loss. And then after that time, she had an unbaby shower, and
Oh,
she
wow.
yeah.
Wow. Yeah.
She gathered the women into, well, I think it was women. I think her husband was there too. They were in a little cottage, and they blessed her, and, and it all came out of a dream she had had where she wasn't, allowed to be in the pregnant space with a very pregnant woman because she was bad energy for that space because she was infertile, and she felt like this isn't fair. The pregnant women shouldn't get all the love. Like those of us who decide, you know, or can't or whatever, or just don't, we should get love too. So that was her. And I'm sort of in that camp. I chose not to have children, and that was a real decision and a really big
Yeah.
loss and a thing. And there weren't any women to talk to about that. So I
And
really
you get
feel
that,
strongly about
yeah.
it.
That's
Yeah.
well, and that's very powerful. It kind of goes back again to, once again, you're not only educating, you're providing ways to be meaningful in people's lives, and also giving a
Yeah.
voice to somebody who is that. Once again, one of the great things about podcasting is we wouldn't know that story. I wouldn't know that story if you hadn't have found it and put it out there. So it's really, really cool. This is my little hijack for Let's Chat Live, because I do this on my show. I like to ask everybody at the end if there is a charity that they like to plug, something that is near and dear to their heart. It definitely only needs to be one. No, I'm just kidding. It can be however many, and usually by saying it, I think Chris Revel is contractually obligated to donate a certain amount to each one that you mentioned. So as many as you mentioned, it's good for him. No, is there any charities that you put out there? Mentioned one earlier, but that are near and dear for you?
Yeah, yeah, I would say, well, definitely in addition to Black Lives Matter, the Pacific Center, which is in Berkeley. I call it the Big Gay House. It's the LGBTQI center in Berkeley, and I used to be a volunteer there. I used to help co-facilitate a
Oh,
group,
wow.
and I went to that group forever too. So it was a really it's a really special place, and um, yeah.
Very cool. So that's something everybody should really check out too. I actually wasn't aware of that one. So it's good. It's great to hear that. I'm just so grateful for the chance to get to meet you. And I hope that not only do I get to hear your show, but I hope we get to maybe interact and work together in the Let's Chat neighborhood. It's one of the cool things that Bree and Chris and Robert have put together. Um, Tell everybody where they can find you. What are the areas of social media or things that
Okay.
they can find you?
Well, shamepiñata.com is all things for the site, and the site's on Instagram, Twitter, and Facebook. Mostly Instagram and Facebook. Mostly Instagram, really. So
Great.
I put on my energy and my love. And then
Oh,
also, if you're interested in hearing, so those radio shows that I mentioned I had in Ohio, I have them archived. One was My Favorite Music, which I highly recommend. And then the other one is the Ohio Light Opera, which is the resident professional light opera company of the College of Worcester, which is, if you're into light opera, especially Gilbert and Sullivan, you can check out the archived show. It was called Oh Joy, Oh Rapture. I think it's still on iTunes, but it's missing all the art because I
hmm,
took down my old website. But anyway, if you're interested in any of
yeah.
that, you can check that out at my audio producer website, which is colleengthomas.com.
Okay. I am now. I didn't know there was a designation of light opera. What does that
Oh,
mean?
I'm not super good at answering this question, even though I had that show. It's,
It's a great
he
way for me to end, right? Pop out some question
like,
has nothing to do with why you're here and just let you answer it.
it's basically not in Italian, and,
Oh, okay. Yeah.
and it's,
Less
short.
calories, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. Okay. No, that's cool. That's cool. So that would be something that I would actually maybe understand a little bit more
Oh, you
and be
definitely.
able to get into. Okay.
Oh, all the
Very
stuff at
cool.
the Ohio Light Opera is in English, so it's all been translated, so there's that.
Yes. Yes. Okay. Well, and once again, thank you, everybody, for being here to watch. You can, as you know, find Colleen all those places and listen to Shame Piñata wherever you get your piping hot, fresh podcasts. Make sure that you give her a share and also good reviews. I think 5 stars is the right answer, obviously, but you want to do that. It helps people find the show as well. So.
Sure.
And I hope everybody will continue to tune in to Let's Chat Live, where we like to Let's Chat Live it up. I'm going to get Chris to say that one of these days. If you're looking for us, you can find the Let's Chat Live on Facebook, as well as the Let's Chat with Revel and Friends group as well. If you're interested, I'd love to interact with people too. I am at Break a Brain, which is my Twitter for my show, The Broken Brain, and love to interact with anyone as well. I should do this off the air, but really I need to invite Colleen to come on my show. So we'll have to
Yeah,
figure that out too.
that'd be awesome.
All right. Well, thank you again, Colleen.
Thank
Anything you
you.
want to leave everybody with? Words of
You know,
wisdom?
I just remember that I want to definitely do a shout out to Terry Hughes, who does the music for Shame Piñata. He's brute force therapy is his business. Um, and I want to make sure to say that I'm at Shame Piñata because you modeled that so well just now
Oh,
everywhere. And words of wisdom. Gosh, just trust your gut and ask for what you want.
fantastic. Awesome. All right. Well, thanks again. And we will see everybody next time as it starts to technically end.